Welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into the complete storyline and breaking down the epic recap of the billionaire wife of the Underworld Tyrant. Before we unpack this story, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Without further ado, let's get into the recap.
Power in the city of Ethelgard was divided into two distinct realms. The first was the glittering, sunlit world of the Chamber of Commerce. It was a world of galas, stock markets, and aristocratic families who believed their old money made them untouchable gods. The Winston family sat near the top of this hierarchy. They were arrogant, superficial, and entirely obsessed with appearances. The second realm was below the underworld. This was a sprawling, invisible empire built on blood, absolute loyalty, and ruthless efficiency. It was controlled by a single, terrifying entity known only to the elites as the Supreme Dawn. Whoever held the title possessed enough wealth to buy the city 3 times over, and enough firepower to level it in an afternoon. For the past 3 years, the underworld had been commanded by a woman. Her name was Chloe. To the outside world, she was a ghost. To her enemies, she was a nightmare. But to the Winston family, the family that had abandoned her to an orphanage when she was an infant, she was just a piece of slum trash. A week ago, driven by a rare, foolish spark of sentimentality, Chloe had allowed herself to be found by her biological parents. She stepped out of the shadows, suppressing her unimaginable wealth and power, hoping to finally experience the warmth of a real family. But the Winstons did not want a daughter. They wanted a pawn. They already had a daughter, Mia, an adopted, spoiled sociopath whom they treated like a princess. They had only brought Chloe back to use her as a cheap stand-in, a scapegoat to take the fall for Mia's massive, illicit gambling debts. Tonight, at the Winston family's grand estate banquet, the illusion of family was about to be violently shattered. The Winston estate ballroom was a sickening display of excessive wealth. Century-old Roman pillars lined the hall, and crystal chandeliers bathed the elite guests in a warm, golden glow. In the center of the room, Chloe stood completely soaked in cheap red wine. Mia Winston stood opposite her, holding an empty wine glass, an ugly, triumphant smirk twisting her heavily contoured face. Mia wore a custom-made, glittering evening gown. Chloe wore a simple, elegant dress that had just been completely ruined. The room was dead silent. Standing near the grand staircase was Mr. Leo, an enforcer for one of the city's most notorious loan sharks. He had come to collect the $10 billion debt that Mia owed. "Mr. Leo, are you out of your mind?" Mia shrieked, pointing an accusatory finger at Chloe. "She is just a piece of slum trash who grew up in an orphanage. Do not let her fool you. She is the one who owes you the money. We signed the agreement." Richard Winston, the patriarch of the family, stepped forward, adjusting his tailored suit. He looked at Mr. Leo with the practiced arrogance of a Chamber of Commerce elite. "Mr. Leo, let me remind you," Richard threatened smoothly. "On behalf of the city's Chamber of Commerce, pissing off our entire social circle over some cheap stand-in is just bad business. Chloe is the one listed on the debt transfer. Take her, and leave my real daughter out of this." Chloe looked at the man who had served her, the man who had thrown her away as a baby and was now trying to sell her to a loan shark to protect a fake. "I'll ask one more time," Chloe said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifying, freezing resonance that made the temperature in the ballroom plummet. "Who ruined my clothes?" Mr. Leo, who knew exactly who Chloe really was in the underworld, was trembling violently. He dropped to his knees right in the middle of the ballroom. The elite guests gasped in absolute shock. "Mr. Leo, what are you doing?" Richard demanded, stepping back. "Please have mercy," Mr. Leo begged, pressing his forehead to the marble floor, not daring to look up at Chloe. "It was all this idiot Mia's idea. She's the one who threw the wine on Miss Chloe. I had nothing to do with it." Mia's face flushed crimson. "Mr. Leo, get up. Are you crazy?" Yes, I threw the wine. Because she's a fake. Mia is just a fake." Chloe turned her freezing gaze to her biological parents. Mrs. Winston wouldn't meet her eyes, clutching her diamond necklace nervously. "Mom, Dad," Chloe asked, the last remaining trace of the naive, hopeful girl dying in her chest. "How could you? You forced me to sign that debt transfer. We were forced into this." Mrs. Winston defended herself shrilly. "Mia is our real flesh and blood in spirit. She was raised here. You are just a stray. You signed that agreement to pay off Mia's debt, and there's no running away from it. Chloe closed her eyes. She took a slow, deep breath, letting the sentimental weakness evaporate from her soul forever. When she opened her eyes, the orphan was gone. The Supreme Dawn had returned. You just said it yourself, Chloe said coldly. It's Mia's debt. What does that have to do with me? With a flick of her wrist, Chloe pulled the original, legally binding debt transfer document from her clutch purse. She held it up for the room to see. Go ahead, Richard Winston sneered. Tear it up. You can tear up 100 copies, but legally, you still owe the syndicate $10 billion. How are you going to pay it back with your cheap little life? Chloe didn't tear it up. She dropped it onto the wine-stained floor. In my world, Chloe declared, her voice echoing with absolute authority, capital is the only law. Before Richard could utter another insult, the heavy oak doors of the ballroom were violently blown open. Dozens of heavily armed, elite mercenaries dressed in tactical black gear stormed into the hall, securing all exits in a matter of seconds. The elite guests screamed, dropping their champagne flutes and backing against the walls in sheer terror. A tall, imposing man wearing a perfectly tailored black suit walked through the phalanx of mercenaries. He carried a silver briefcase handcuffed to his wrist. This was Max, Chloe's right-hand man and the chief executioner of the Underworld. Max walked straight past the trembling Winston family, stopped precisely 2 feet from Chloe, and bowed at a perfect 90-degree angle. Lopez, Max announced, his voice carrying the weight of a death sentence. The Supreme Dawn. Under your mandate, everything has completely liquidated exactly as you ordered. He unclipped the briefcase, opened it, and presented a golden, embossed document to Chloe. I believe, Max continued, turning slightly to glare at the Winston family, this is the deep water port control deed you all wanted to sign, right? Richard Winston's eyes bulged out of his skull. The deep water port was the crown jewel of the city's commerce. Whoever owned it controlled the entire supply chain of the eastern seaboard. The Chamber of Commerce had been trying to buy it for a decade. Is this right? Richard stammered, his legs giving out as he collapsed onto a nearby chair. This is impossible. How the hell do you have the supreme deed to the deep water port? Who the hell are you? Chloe looked down at her biological father with utter, unadulterated disgust. My dear father, Chloe mocked, her voice dripping with venom. Open your damn eyes and look closely at who owns every inch of the ground you're standing on. Max snapped his fingers. 2 mercenaries stepped forward, unrolling a massive architectural blueprint of the city across the banquet table. Highlighted in red was the Winston estate. Highlighted in gold was the surrounding 30 miles of prime real estate. The Winston estate, Max announced coldly, is located on Sector 4 of the Deep Waterport Expansion Zone. The land is privately owned by the Supreme Dawn, which means, Mr. Winston, your house is currently squatting on our boss's property. Mrs. Winston let out a terrified shriek, immediately realizing the catastrophic shift in power. The slum trash they had tried to sell was the literal owner of their world. She rushed forward, throwing herself to her knees near the wine spill, her diamond necklace dangling in the puddle. My sweet daughter, Mrs. Winston cried, her face a mask of pathetic desperation. Please don't be mad. I will have someone clean this up right now. This estate is worth $300 million. Since you own the land, we can all be a family. Just let us stay. Chloe looked at the puddle of cheap wine, and then at her mother's groveling form. You have completely ruined the floor, Chloe said indifferently. I don't want this house anymore. She turned to Max. Level it. With pleasure, boss. Max smiled ruthlessly. Max raised a hand radio to his mouth. All units, evacuate the trash. Bring in the heavy machinery. Raise it to the foundation. Mia Winston, finally realizing the severity of the situation, began to scream hysterically. What are you doing? Are you out of your mind? I have a whole closet of haute couture in my room. You can't do this. Mercenaries grabbed Mia by the arms, dragging her ruthlessly toward the front doors. Get your filthy hands off me. Mia shrieked, kicking and thrashing. Richard Winston fell to his knees as the sound of massive, armored bulldozers rolling up the driveway shook the crystal chandeliers above them. No, Richard wept, reaching out toward the architecture of his pride. My century-old Roman pillars. My $300 million estate. No! Still here, Max asked, pulling a heavy magnum from his shoulder holster. I don't mind turning you into scrap along with the estate. Throw them all out. The mercenaries grabbed Richard and Mrs. Winston, tossing them out the front doors into the freezing night air. They landed in the dirt of their own driveway, wearing their expensive evening wear, shivering as the bitter wind cut through them. Chloe walked slowly out the front door, standing on the marble steps, watching the bulldozers line up against the magnificent facade of the mansion. Mrs. Winston crawled toward the steps, tears streaming down her ruined makeup. "Chloe, for the sake of our blood, please save me. I'll die out here. The wind is harsh tonight." Max stepped between them, draping a heavy, luxurious black fur coat over Chloe's shoulders. "Boss, don't catch a cold." Chloe looked down at the pathetic creatures who had once called themselves her parents. "A way out," Chloe whispered, her eyes devoid of any mercy. "I gave you countless chances. I gave you my heart. You threw it away. From today on, enjoy the rest of your pathetic lives in the gutter." Chloe turned and walked toward a waiting, armored Rolls-Royce. As the car door slammed shut, the bulldozers surged forward. The deafening sound of shattering glass and collapsing stone echoed through the night. The Grand Winston estate, a symbol of arrogance and fake aristocracy, crumbled into dust within minutes. Hours later, the Winston family was shivering beneath a concrete overpass on the edge of the city. The wind was brutal. Mia was crying, her ruined designer dress soaked in mud. "Richard, you need to figure something out," Mrs. Winston sobbed, wrapping her arms around herself. "I cannot take these rats under the bridge anymore. At least let us move back to that old little villa of ours in the suburbs." Richard Winston paced furiously, his phone pressed to his ear. "There are people staking out the old villa. It's got to be Leo's men or her mercenaries. Going back there now is basically a death wish. We need the chamber." He dialed a private, encrypted number. "Hello, President Chang," Richard said, his voice trembling with a desperate, manic energy. "It is me, Richard. Do not hang up. Listen to me. I will transfer every last hidden share in my name over to you for free. The entire Winston corporate portfolio." There was a pause on the line. "But I only have one condition," Richard hissed, his eyes burning with insane, suicidal vengeance. "Use the Chamber of Commerce's highest clearance and freeze all of Chloe's local credit cards and bank accounts immediately. I want a citywide blacklist issued." He looked at his shivering wife and adopted daughter, his pride completely shattered, choosing mutual destruction over defeat. "Any mall, restaurant, or hotel that lets her in makes an enemy out of the entire Chamber of Commerce," Richard commanded into the phone. "I want her out on the streets with nothing but bounced checks, starving to death." "You got it." Inside the sprawling, ultra-modern penthouse that served as the Underworld Command Center, Chloe was sitting on a plush leather sofa, sipping an espresso. Max stormed into the room, a secure tablet in his hand. His face was a mask of sheer, murderous fury. "Boss," Max growled, stopping before her. "I have news. These scumbags actually dare to use the chamber to blacklist you. They've forcibly frozen your local accounts." Chloe took a calm sip of her espresso. "Oh, good. Perfect, actually," Max said, cracking his knuckles. "I'll have the Blood Rose squad assemble and pack heavy firepower. I want Richard's head mounted on the Bay Bridge toll portal in 10 minutes. Max, get back here," Chloe ordered softly. Max stopped, looking back at her in frustration. "Boss, after what they did to you, if I don't run them to the ground right now, the entire North Hunter Syndicate is going to think I've gone soft." Chloe set her cup down. She stood up, walking over to the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city. "The moment I reached out to you guys," Chloe said, her voice a calm, deep ocean of authority, "I stopped being that naive little girl begging for a family. What is the rush? Why would you dirty your own hands just to crush a few ants?" She turned back to Max, a terrifying, beautiful smile touching her lips. "It is going to take another 24 hours for my 100 billion in offshore assets to hit my local accounts anyway," Chloe calculated perfectly. "Relax. Let the bullets fly for a bit. I want to see just how stupid they can get in the next 24 hours. Max bowed his head, realizing the brilliance of the trap. "Understood, boss." Chloe looked out over the city. The Chamber of Commerce thought they had cut off her air supply. They had no idea they had just locked themselves in a cage with a monster, and the real slaughter was about to begin. The morning sun cast a harsh glare over the premium shopping district of Ethelgard. Despite spending the night shivering beneath a concrete overpass, Mia Winston was not about to let the city know her family had been reduced to ashes. Using the last of the hidden, high-interest cash her mother had squirreled away, Mia had dragged herself and her sycophantic friends to the most exclusive VIP boutique in the city. She needed the world to believe she was still untouched. Inside the opulent, marble-floored store, Mia stood before a three-way mirror, wearing a glittering, multi-million-dollar couture dress. "Make it look good," Mia commanded her friend, posing aggressively while holding a glass of complimentary champagne. "Max out the filters. Lengthen my legs. I'm posting this to the socialite group chat right now so the whole city knows that even without the Winston estate, Mia is still the undisputed queen." Her friend eagerly snapped photos on her phone. "Of course! You're naturally gorgeous, Miss Mia. This couture piece looks like it was custom-made just for you." "Duh!" Mia ran her hands over the delicate diamond-threaded fabric. "I paid millions for this in cold, hard cash. Watch your filthy hands," she snapped at a nearby sales associate who was adjusting the hem. "If you snag a single thread, 10 years of your salary won't be enough to pay for it." The associate bowed her head apologetically, stepping back. Mia admired her reflection, a toxic, delusional smile spreading across her face. "As long as I keep my status in the social circle," Mia thought to herself, "who cares about a few million in loan shark debt? The Chamber of Commerce backed my father. We will rebuild, and Chloe will rot." Suddenly, the heavy glass doors of the boutique slid open. The store manager, a haughty woman with sharp features and a tailored suit, immediately stepped forward, her nose wrinkling in disgust. "Hey, miss! You must be lost," the manager barked, holding out a hand to block the newcomer. "This is a top-tier global VIP boutique. A pair of socks here costs 5 figures. We don't just let anyone wander in. I'm just browsing," a calm, familiar voice replied. Mia froze. She turned around, her eyes narrowing into venomous slits. Standing in the entryway of the boutique was Chloe. She was dressed simply, wearing a clean, unbranded white shirt and jeans that cost a fraction of the dresses surrounding her. Browsing, the manager scoffed, looking Chloe up and down with absolute contempt. "Could you even afford to replace something if you broke it? Get out before your poverty stench rubs off on our VIP clients." Mia laughed out loud, walking toward the front of the store, the train of her $1 million dress dragging across the floor. "Well, look who it is," Mia mocked, clapping her hands together. "Isn't this the $100 billion tycoon? The Supreme Dawn herself. What's wrong, Chloe? Can't even afford a decent outfit? You have to wear $50 knockoffs and sneak in here just to steal some AC?" Chloe stood her ground, her expression entirely unreadable. Her eyes flicked from Mia's gaudy dress to the manager's hostile face. "A $50 outfit is at least clean," Chloe replied smoothly, her voice a razor-sharp blade wrapped in silk. "Still better than some clowns who use dirty money to buy a dress, but don't even dare cut the tags off because they have to return it later to pay for their bridge toll." Mia's face flushed a furious, ugly red. The tag was, in fact, still tucked carefully inside the collar. "You bitch!" Mia shrieked. "What the hell are you talking about?" The manager crossed her arms, smirking at Chloe. "Don't act tough, little girl. Everyone in the high-end retail network got the memo this morning. A maximum-level Chamber of Commerce blacklist. It's not just a blacklist, every single bank account and credit card in her name was frozen early this morning. She's nothing but a broke, filthy beggar now." Mia's wicked smile returned, wider and crueler than ever. "Exactly. Manager, what are you standing around for? Throw this broke loser out. If her poverty stench ruins my new dress, I'm calling corporate to file a complaint right now." The manager nodded eagerly, eager to please the woman holding the cash. "So, you're just a deadbeat blacklisted by the chamber, and you still have the nerve to waltz into my store and act like a VIP? Are you sure you want me to kick you out?" "Hell yes," Mia yelled. "What am I supposed to invite her to dinner? Security. Where the hell is security?" Two massive, heavily armed boutique security guards marched to the front of the store, cracking their knuckles and glaring at Chloe. Mia pulled out her phone and hit the live stream button, pointing the camera directly at Chloe's face. The viewer count immediately began to skyrocket as the city's socialites tuned in to watch the drama. "Start the stream." Mia laughed maliciously. "Make the title, Fake Heiress Exposed and Beaten Down in Public. Listen up, chat. Take a good look. This is the scammer who tried to steal my life. Today, I am doing the world a favor and teaching her how high society works." Mia lowered the phone slightly, looking at the security guards. "Beat her. Beat the hell out of her. I will cover any medical damages or legal fees in cash. The store manager pointed at the door. Listen here, miss. I gave you a chance to walk out on your own, so do not blame me for getting ugly. You are actively disrupting our business. Chloe didn't flinch. She simply looked at the digital clock displayed on the boutique's wall. You're running a business? Chloe asked calmly, checking her watch. Still acting tough on your deathbed? Security, the manager roared, losing the last of her patience. Break her damn legs and throw her out. The two massive guards lunged forward, reaching out to grab Chloe by the shoulders. Beep, beep, beep. Chloe's sleek smartwatch let out 3 sharp, distinct chimes. 24 hours, Chloe whispered, a terrifying, predatory smile finally breaking across her face. Time is up. Before the guards could lay a single finger on Chloe, the entire boutique began to violently shake. The crystal display cases rattled, and the expensive perfume bottles tipped over, shattering on the marble floor. A deafening, rhythmic roaring sound overpowered the ambient music of the store, vibrating in everyone's chest. What the hell is going on? Mia shrieked, dropping her phone. Is it an earthquake? Outside the massive glass windows of the boutique, a shadow fell over the sunlit street. The pedestrians outside were screaming, pointing up at the sky, their hair whipping wildly in a sudden, hurricane-force wind. Is that a helicopter? The manager gasped, pressing her hands against the glass. It wasn't just a helicopter. It was a massive, military-grade luxury transport chopper painted in sleek, matte black with a golden insignia on the side. Why the hell is it landing right at the mall entrance? Mia yelled, shielding her eyes from the blinding dust kicking up outside. Do not tell me it is some old money billionaire picking up his little trophy wife. Why is it that whenever this damn Chloe is around, my luck goes straight to hell? Mia glared at Chloe, who was standing perfectly still, watching the chopper touch down with an air of absolute regal expectation. Whatever, Mia sneered, trying to regain her composure. She is about to be ruined for good anyway. The heavy doors of the helicopter slid open. The downdraft sent the boutique's display signs flying across the sidewalk. A man stepped out. He was impeccably dressed in a bespoke suit possessing an aura of undeniable, terrifying global authority. He was surrounded by a phalanx of elite executive bodyguards. The store manager gasped, her hands flying to her mouth in absolute shock. Oh my God, the manager whispered, her voice trembling with awe. That is corporate's top-tier private chopper. Could it be CEO Smith from Global HQ? CEO Smith? Mia asked, suddenly perking up. He is a business titan, the manager said hysterically, fixing her hair and straightening her blazer. Even the mayor has to wait in line to get a meeting with him. He owns the parent company of this entire luxury retail chain. Oh my God, we actually get to see CEO Smith in the flesh. What kind of lucky day is this? Mia's delusion, fueled by her own narcissism, immediately took over. The CEO? Mia beamed, puffing out her chest and stepping toward the glass doors. He must have heard. He must have heard I dropped straight cash on this season's top-tier multi-million-dollar couture today. He flew all the way here just to personally thank his best VIP client. Mia threw open the boutique doors and strutted out onto the sidewalk, completely ignoring the hurricane-force winds threatening to rip her dress apart. She raised a hand, waving enthusiastically at the approaching business titan. CEO Smith! Mia shouted over the roaring rotors, wearing her most sickeningly sweet smile. Welcome! I am Mia Winston. CEO Smith didn't even look at her. He marched right past Mia, his elite bodyguards violently shoving her out of the way, sending her tumbling into a nearby trash can in her $1,000,000 dress. Smith strode into the boutique, his eyes scanning the room until they locked onto the woman in the simple white shirt. The most powerful corporate titan in the hemisphere stopped directly in front of Chloe. He dropped to one knee, bowing his head in absolute reverence. Supreme Dawn, CEO Smith announced, his voice booming through the silent boutique. The offshore asset transfer is complete. Your $100 billion has arrived. Your empire awaits your command. The interior of the VIP boutique was so silent you could hear a pin drop. The hurricane-force winds from the helicopter outside had died down, but the storm inside the store had just made landfall. The store manager's jaw hung open, her eyes darting between the kneeling CEO Smith and the woman in the cheap white shirt. Supreme Dawn? the manager whispered, the blood draining completely from her face. She looked at Chloe, the woman she had just ordered security to assault. Chloe didn't look at the manager. She looked down at CEO Smith, her expression one of absolute, unbothered control. "Stand up, Smith," Chloe commanded softly. CEO Smith immediately rose to his feet, keeping his head respectfully bowed. "The global board of directors has received your wire transfer, boss. As of 60 seconds ago, your $100 billion has cleared. You are now the sole majority shareholder of the entire global luxury retail conglomerate. Every boutique, every factory, every brand name under this umbrella now belongs exclusively to you." The manager's knees buckled. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her manicured hands trembling violently. The woman she had called a broke, filthy beggar hadn't just bought a dress. She had bought the entire global brand. "The Chamber of Commerce issued a blacklist against me," Chloe stated, her voice echoing coldly in the lavish space. "They froze my local accounts. They thought they could starve me out." CEO Smith let out a scoff of utter contempt. "The Chamber of Commerce is a puddle trying to drown an ocean. Their local jurisdiction means absolutely nothing against your offshore capital. What are your orders, Supreme Dawn?" Chloe finally turned her gaze to the trembling store manager and the two paralyzed security guards. "You run a business based on appearances," Chloe said, walking slowly toward the manager. "You judge a person's worth by the tags on their clothes, blinding yourself to the actual power standing right in front of you. Please," the manager wept, pressing her forehead against the floor. "I was blind. I was just following Miss Mia's instructions. Please don't fire me." "Fire you?" Chloe asked, a dark, terrifying amusement in her eyes. "Smith." "Yes, boss." "Strip her of her title, her severance, and her pension," Chloe ordered, "and issue a global corporate blacklist. Ensure she never works in the retail, hospitality, or corporate sectors anywhere on the planet ever again. If any company hires her, buy that company and dissolve it." The manager let out a gut-wrenching wail of pure despair, realizing her life was over. Chloe turned toward the shattered glass doors. Outside, Mia was still struggling to pull herself out of the trash can, her $1 million dress stained with garbage and city grime. And as for the trash outside, Chloe commanded, adjusting the cuffs of her simple white shirt, "Ban Mia Winston from every property I own. If she takes one step onto my grounds, break her legs." 3 days later, the Grand Imperial Hotel. Despite the total annihilation of the Winston estate and the boutique humiliation, Mia's delusions had only mutated into a dangerous, manic desperation. To admit defeat meant accepting life under a bridge. Instead, she chose the path of absolute, suicidal deception. Mia had rented the grand ballroom of the Grand Imperial Hotel, throwing a lavish engagement party for herself to prove to the city's socialites that she was still on top. To fund this, she had committed the ultimate crime. She had intercepted and stolen a heavily guarded courier package meant for the Supreme Dawn. Inside the ballroom, the socialites gasped in awe as Mia strutted across the floor. Hanging around her neck was a diamond so massive, so flawlessly cut, that it seemed to absorb the light from the chandeliers. It was a legendary gemstone, radiating a mesmerizing, deep oceanic blue. "I knew you were the real top-tier heiress, Mia," one of the socialites squealed, practically drooling over the gem. "But what is that?" Mia touched the diamond, a sickeningly proud smirk plastered across her face. "This is the legendary billion-dollar heart of the century," the crowd gasped in unison. "One of Europe's most secretive old-money billionaires sent it to me on a private jet just to propose," Mia lied effortlessly, soaking in the envy of her peers. How could some cheap goats who sleep their way to the top ever understand this kind of love? "I am going to be the most powerful woman in the world." While Mia reveled in her stolen glory, the heavy double doors of the ballroom swung open. Chloe walked in. She was accompanied by Max and a team of high-level architects and asset liquidators. Chloe wasn't there for the party. She was there because, earlier that morning, she had purchased the Grand Imperial Hotel. Chloe looked around the ballroom, her eyes scanning the tacky crystal swans and gaudy gold drapery Mia had chosen for her fake engagement. "Chairman," Max said, holding up a tablet, "the asset liquidation for this hotel is fully complete. The title is in your name. The taste in this hall is incredibly tacky," Chloe noted, her voice carrying a profound boredom. "Get someone to smash all these extra crystals tomorrow and redo the entire aesthetic. I want it leveled to the concrete." "Yes, of course," Max bowed respectfully. "Whatever you prefer, Chairman." Mia, hearing the commotion, turned around. When she saw Chloe standing at the entrance, her manic pride instantly flared into venomous rage. "Look who it is!" Mia shouted, marching across the ballroom, flanked by her sycophantic friends. "What an entrance! What is wrong, Chloe? Did our little mob mistress take a day off from serving that cold-blooded killer to come freeload at my party?" Max's hand instinctively drifted toward his shoulder holster, his eyes darkening with lethal intent. "How dare you? You dare speak to the chairman like—" Chloe held up a single finger, instantly silencing her chief executioner. She looked at Mia, and then, her gaze locked onto the massive blue diamond resting against Mia's collarbone. The heart of the century. Chloe had purchased that diamond on the European black market 2 nights ago. It was supposed to be delivered to her secure vault. "What are you looking at?" Mia sneered, noticing Chloe staring at her chest. She lifted the diamond proudly. "I bet you have never seen a diamond this perfect in your entire life. Chloe, open your damn eyes and look closely. This is the life I, Mia, was meant to have." Mia stepped closer, her voice dropping into a hateful hiss. "Even if you strip naked and crawl into a mob boss's bed, you will never touch a diamond of this caliber in your miserable life." Chloe didn't look angry. She looked at Mia with the profound, clinical pity one might reserve for a rat that had just proudly walked into a bear trap. "Mia," Chloe asked softly, her voice echoing in the sudden quiet of the ballroom, "do you have any idea that the thing hanging around your neck is a death warrant?" Mia burst into loud, theatrical laughter, tossing her hair back. "Stop acting like you are just sour, you can't have it." Mia mocked. "A death warrant? Please." Even if the Grim Reaper himself showed up today, he would have to get on his knees and kiss the hem of my dress. The socialites behind her giggled, emboldened by the sheer size of the diamond and the illusion of Mia's invisible billionaire fiancé. Chloe shook her head slowly. "You really have no idea what you've done, do you?" "Cut the crap," Mia snapped, her face twisting into an ugly sneer. "I don't care if God himself walks through that door. You're going to get on your knees and lick my shoes clean." Mia turned to her group of friends, grabbing a bottle of expensive champagne from a passing waiter. "Girls," Mia yelled, "since this cheap little crow is so desperate for attention, trying to crash our swan party, let's use some champagne to wash that broke-ass stench off her." "Hell yeah!" One of the girls cheered, grabbing a bottle of her own. "Drench her. Teach her a lesson. Go to hell, you bitch." They raised the bottles, preparing to spray the sticky alcohol all over Chloe and her entourage. But before a single drop could spill, the massive floor-to-ceiling windows of the ballroom shattered violently inward. Crash! Shards of glass rained down like lethal confetti. Black ropes dropped from the ceiling skylights, and a dozen heavily armed, elite tactical operatives rappelled directly into the center of the ballroom. They wore unmarked black combat gear, their faces hidden behind tactical masks, gripping heavy assault rifles. "Everybody get down with your hands on your heads! Now!" The lead operative roared, his voice amplified by a tactical megaphone. "Anyone moves a muscle, we shoot to kill." Absolute chaos erupted. The socialites shrieked in terror, dropping to the floor and covering their heads. The string quartet scrambled under the stage. The elegant ballroom was instantly transformed into a terrifying hostage situation. Mia froze, the bottle of champagne slipping from her trembling fingers and shattering on the marble floor. "Oh my God!" A socialite screamed from the floor. "Help! It's a terrorist attack! Please don't shoot!" The lead tactical operative ignored the screaming crowd. His eyes locked onto the center of the room. He marched straight toward Mia, raising his rifle. What the hell are you doing?" Mia stammered, her voice shaking with terror as the barrel of the gun pointed at her chest. She desperately tried to cling to her delusional armor. "Do you have any idea who I am?" "Shut up! I'm the future wife of a billionaire." The operative didn't flinch. "How dare you filthy mercenaries point guns at me?" Mia shrieked, panic fully taking over. "My husband will have you all killed." "Shut your filthy mouth," the operative barked, his voice dripping with lethal authority. "I don't give a damn who you are. Lock down all the exits. Nobody leaves." He gestured toward the massive blue gem hanging around Mia's neck. "We are tracking down a stolen billion-dollar national treasure," the operative announced to the room. The heart of the century, the socialites on the floor gasped, looking up at Mia in absolute horror. "Stolen? National treasure?" Mia choked out. Is the diamond around my neck stolen goods?" "You're full of shit." "Stolen my ass." Mia continued to scream, stepping back. A billionaire who's secretly in love with me sent this. You've got the wrong person. This is defamation. A piece of trash thief like you isn't even worthy of speaking this diamond's name. The operative didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, grabbed the thick platinum chain around her neck, and violently ripped it off. Mia screamed as the chain snapped, leaving a red mark across her skin. Don't you dare touch me. This is a robbery. A mystery billionaire gave this to me as a token of his love. I'm his fiancé. If you lay a single finger on me, he'll wipe out your entire family. The operative held the billion-dollar gem up to the light, confirming its authenticity, before looking down at the pathetic crying girl in front of him. Your cheap skin and filthy soul are an absolute disgrace to the heart of the century, the operative spat. A billionaire's wife? Are you still daydreaming in the gutter? This diamond is a one-of-a-kind masterpiece that sold for $1 billion on the European black market just last night. Its true owner wields the ultimate power in this world. No, Mia shrieked, lunging forward to grab it back. It's mine! God gave it to me. Let go of it. Two operatives immediately grabbed Mia by the arms, slamming her to the marble floor, pressing a heavy combat boot into her back. My necklace! Mia sobbed into the cold floor. My $1 billion! You thugs! The socialites watching the scene unfold began to whisper frantically. Oh my God, she actually stole it. She stole $1 billion national treasure. She's going to get the death penalty for sure. Who on earth is the real owner of this diamond? Even the top operatives from Switzerland are running errands for them like lapdogs. The lead operative carefully placed the heart of the century into a velvet-lined titanium lockbox. He turned away from the sobbing Mia on the floor. He walked directly toward Chloe, who had watched the entire spectacle with absolute, unblinking indifference. The lead operative, a man who struck terror into international syndicates, stopped in front of her. He dropped to one knee, lowering his head in a gesture of profound, absolute submission. I apologize for the fright, the operative said, his voice echoing loudly in the dead-silent ballroom. Allowing a priceless treasure like this to fall into the hands of such a filthy thief is a massive failure by our security team. Please punish us as you see fit. He held up the open titanium lockbox, presenting the massive blue diamond. My honored master, the operative declared, ensuring every single person in the room could hear him. Your priceless treasure has been safely returned to you. The entire ballroom stopped breathing. Mia, pinned to the floor by the combat boot, slowly lifted her head. Through her tears and ruined makeup, she looked at the mercenary kneeling. She looked at the $1 billion diamond. And then she looked at the woman the operative called master. It was Chloe. The invisible billionaire fiancé didn't exist. The ultimate power in the world, the true owner of the heart of the century, the master of the elite mercenaries, was the very woman Mia had tried to drown in champagne. Mia's mind finally, completely, and irrevocably shattered. The silence in the grand ballroom of the Imperial Hotel was absolute, thick with the suffocating weight of sheer, undeniable power. Mia lay pinned to the cold marble floor beneath the tactical boot of the elite operative. Her heavily contoured face was streaked with black mascara and tears, her eyes wide with a madness born of complete psychological collapse. She looked at the $1 billion heart of the century resting in the titanium lockbox. She looked at the operative kneeling in reverence. And then she stared at Chloe. No, Mia giggled, the sound thin, hysterical, and completely unhinged. No, 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 this is a prank. This is a setup. You rented these actors. You bought a fake diamond on the street to make me look bad. You're just a filthy orphan. The lead operative's eyes narrowed behind his tactical mask. He shifted his weight, pressing his boot harder into Mia's spine. Mia shrieked in pain. Watch your tongue when speaking to the Supreme Dawn, the operative growled, his voice vibrating with lethal intent. One more word of disrespect, and I will remove your tongue from your skull. Chloe stepped forward, the heels of her simple shoes echoing like gunshots in the silent room. She didn't look angry. She looked down at Mia with the cold, detached pity of a god observing a dying insect. Chloe reached into the titanium lockbox. Her slender, elegant fingers lifted the massive, oceanic blue diamond. It caught the light of the chandeliers, casting a mesmerizing, aquatic glow across Chloe's unbothered face. You wanted to know how high society works, Mia? Chloe asked, her voice a soft, terrifying whisper that carried to every corner of the room. You thought wearing a price tag made you royalty. You thought stealing a jewel would make you a queen. Chloe let the diamond drop back into the velvet-lined box. It landed with a heavy, definitive thud. But you forgot the most important rule of the underworld, Chloe said, crouching down so she was eye to eye with the sobbing, pathetic girl. A crown does not give you power. Power gives you the crown. And you, Mia, you have absolutely nothing. The socialites, who moments ago had been cheering for Chloe to be drenched in champagne, suddenly realized they were standing on the wrong side of a massacre. We had nothing to do with this. One of the girls screamed, dropping her champagne bottle and falling to her knees. Miss Chloe Supreme Dawn. Mia lied to us. She said she was a billionaire's fiancée. She's a manipulative psycho. Please, another socialite begged, pressing her face to the floor. We are innocent. Have mercy. Chloe stood up, smoothing the cuffs of her white shirt. Throw them all out. Ban them from the city limits. If I see their faces again, sink them into the harbor. The operatives moved with ruthless efficiency, dragging the screaming, crying socialites out of the ballroom. Mia was hauled to her feet, her arms twisted painfully behind her back, her $1,000,000 dress ruined, her reputation entirely, permanently obliterated. Just as Mia was being dragged toward the shattered glass doors, a commotion erupted in the hotel lobby. Out of my way! A booming, arrogant voice demanded. I am President Shang of the Chamber of Commerce. I demand to see the manager. This hotel is harboring a blacklisted fugitive. Richard Winston marched into the ballroom, flanked by the powerful President Shang and a dozen corporate bodyguards. Richard looked manic, his clothes wrinkled from a night spent under a bridge, but his eyes burned with the desperate thrill of anticipated vengeance. There she is! Richard shouted, pointing a shaking finger at Chloe. President Shang, that is the slum trash. Arrest her. Throw her on the streets. Execute the blacklist. Richard stopped. He blinked, the manic thrill suddenly evaporating. He finally noticed the shattered windows. He noticed the tactical ropes hanging from the ceiling. And he noticed the dozen heavily armed elite operatives aiming laser-sighted assault rifles directly at his chest. President Shang froze, the color draining entirely from his arrogant face. What? What is the meaning of this? Who are you people? Chloe stood in the center of the room, Max stepping up to her right side, his hand resting casually on his holstered magnum. President Shang, Chloe greeted smoothly, her voice laced with dark amusement. I was wondering when the Chamber of Commerce would finally show up to enforce their little blacklist. Shang swallowed hard, trying to maintain his corporate authority. You are Chloe Winston? The blacklisted deadbeat. How did you hire these mercenaries? You have zero funds. Your accounts are frozen. Are they? Chloe asked, tilting her head. President Shang's customized luxury smartphone suddenly began to ring. It was an emergency override tone, a sound reserved only for catastrophic corporate failure. With trembling hands, Shang answered it. Sir, his chief financial officer screamed through the speaker, sounding on the verge of a heart attack. Sir, it's a bloodbath. A massive, untraceable offshore conglomerate just executed a hostile takeover of the entire Chamber of Commerce. What? Shang gasped, his knees buckling. That's impossible. We control the city's supply chain. They bought the supply chain. The CFO wept. They bought our banks, our logistics, our real estate. They liquidated our stock in 60 seconds. Sir, the chamber is bankrupt. We have zero assets. We are ruined. The phone slipped from Shang's hand, clattering against the marble floor. Richard Winston stared at Shang in sheer horror. President Shang, what's wrong? Order them to arrest her. You idiot! Shang roared, turning and punching Richard squarely in the jaw. Richard collapsed to the floor, spitting blood. You brought the apocalypse to my doorstep. You told me she was a broke orphan. You told me she was nobody. Shang fell to his knees, crawling toward Chloe. Supreme Dawn, please! I was deceived by this rat. I will surrender the chamber. I will sign whatever you want. Chloe looked down at the men who had tried to starve her out. You already have, Chloe said coldly. Max, strip the Winstons and the Shang family of their remaining assets. Cancel their identities. Ensure they can never hold a bank account, a passport, or a property deed ever again. Let them live out their days as ghosts in the slums they tried to send me to. No, please. Richard wept, crawling toward her shoes. Chloe, you are my daughter, my flesh and blood. You can't do this to your own father. Chloe looked at him, her eyes as cold as the bottom of the ocean. I have no father, Chloe said. I only have my empire. Suddenly, the ambient temperature in the shattered ballroom seemed to plummet. The tactical operatives, who had stood like unshakable statues of iron, immediately lowered their weapons and bowed their heads in absolute, terrifying unison. The heavy oak doors at the far end of the hall swung open with a slow, agonizing creak. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed across the marble floor. A man walked into the ballroom. He was breathtakingly handsome, with sharp, aristocratic features carved from marble and eyes that held the pitch-black darkness of an abyss. He wore a bespoke, midnight black overcoat that swept behind him like a shadow. The air around him hummed with an aura of absolute, unparalleled violence and supreme authority. This was Lord Alexander Vance, the Underworld Tyrant, the only man on the planet who possessed a power that rivaled the Supreme Dawn. And he was her husband. Alexander walked past the trembling, weeping forms of Richard, Mia, and President Shang without even glancing at them. To the tyrant, they were less than dust. He walked straight toward the center of the room. When he reached Chloe, the terrifying, murderous aura surrounding him instantly vanished. Alexander reached out, his large, scarred hand gently taking her delicate fingers. He bowed his head, pressing a soft, reverent kiss to her knuckles. "My queen," Alexander murmured, his deep voice carrying a warmth reserved only for her. "I step away to secure the European borders for a week, and I return to find rats infesting your ballroom." Chloe's cold, unshakable facade finally softened. A genuine, breathtaking smile touched her lips as she looked up at her husband. "Just a minor pest problem, Alexander," Chloe replied softly. "I was just taking out the trash." Alexander turned his head slightly, his abyssal eyes finally falling upon the Winston family. Richard and Mia recoiled, screaming in sheer terror as if they had just looked directly into the eyes of the devil. "They insulted you," Alexander stated, his voice dropping to a terrifying, lethal octave. "They dared to make my wife bleed. Death is too merciful for them." "I agree," Chloe said, wrapping her arm through his. "Which is why I've condemned them to a lifetime of absolute poverty. They will watch from the gutters as we rule the world." Alexander smiled a dark, predatory grin that promised nightmares. "A brilliant judgment, my love." As always, he turned back to his elite operatives. "Clear this filth from my sight. If they stop crawling before they reach the city limits, break their arms." "Yes, my lord," the operatives shouted in unison. As Mia, Richard, and Sheng were violently dragged out of the ballroom, screaming and begging into the void, Alexander turned his attention back to his wife. He reached into the titanium lockbox and lifted the heart of the century. With gentle, loving precision, the Underworld Tyrant fastened the billion-dollar diamond around Chloe's neck. The blue gem rested perfectly against her collarbone, a symbol of her absolute, unshakable supremacy. "It suits you," Alexander whispered, kissing her forehead. Chloe looked out at the shattered windows, the empty ballroom, and the city skyline glowing in the distance. She had started this journey as a discarded orphan, a pawn meant to be sacrificed. But she had forged herself in the fires of the underworld, rising to become the Supreme Dawn, the billionaire wife of the tyrant. She leaned her head against her husband's chest, feeling the steady, powerful beat of his heart. "Come, my king," Chloe said, a victorious, serene smile on her face. "Our empire awaits." 3 months had passed since the night the Winston family was erased from the highest echelons of society. Sector 8 of Ethelgard was a place where the sun rarely seemed to shine, a labyrinth of decaying concrete, overflowing dumpsters, and desperate souls. Here, capital was not measured in billions, but in scraps of moldy bread and drops of clean water. The freezing autumn rain lashed against the rusted corrugated roof of a makeshift lean-to. Beneath it, shivering violently in a filthy, torn burlap sack, sat Mia Winston. Her once flawless skin was smeared with soot and grease, her manicured nails broken and bleeding from digging through trash cans. Beside her, Richard Winston, the former titan of the Chamber of Commerce, was coughing up blood into a ragged cloth, his eyes hollow and devoid of sanity. They were ghosts. Stripped of their identities, they couldn't even beg on the main streets without the Underworld's enforcers breaking their fingers. Suddenly, the harsh, blinding glare of high-beam headlights pierced the gloomy alleyway. The roar of a twin-turbo V12 engine echoed off the brick walls. A fleet of 3 sleek, bulletproof matte gray Maybachs rolled through the sludge, stopping directly in front of the Winston's pathetic shelter. Mia covered her eyes against the glaring lights. Men in sharp, gray tactical suits stepped out, holding umbrellas. Finally, the rear door of the lead Maybach opened. A man stepped into the rain. He possessed a sharp, aristocratic face, with pale skin and eyes the color of oxidized copper. He wore a heavy trench coat lined with silver fox fur and leaned on a cane topped with a polished obsidian skull. This was Baron Silas Thorne, the ruthless leader of the European Obsidian Cartel. For decades, the cartel had controlled the global subterranean arms trade. Silas was old money, the kind of money that funded wars and overthrew governments. And he despised the Supreme Dawn. Silas walked slowly through the mud, stopping in front of Mia. He looked down at her with absolute, unadulterated revulsion. "So," Silas murmured, his voice a smooth, venomous drawl. "This is what remains of the legendary Winston family, reduced to feral animals." Richard scrambled forward on his hands and knees in the mud. "Please, my lord, we have nothing. Take whatever you want, just give us a piece of bread." Silas didn't even look at Richard. He kicked the former patriarch in the jaw with the tip of his polished leather boot, sending Richard sprawling into a puddle of freezing water. Silas crouched down, his copper eyes locking onto Mia. "I am not here for this pathetic old man. I am here for you, Mia. I understand you have a deep, intimate hatred for Chloe Vance, the woman currently playing at being the Supreme Dawn." At the sound of Chloe's name, a spark of manic, feral hatred ignited in Mia's hollow eyes. "I hate her. I hate her more than I fear death. She stole my life. She stole my billionaire." Silas smiled, a chilling, predatory curve of his lips. The Obsidian Cartel had recently lost a massive European supply chain because Chloe had aggressively bought out their shell companies. Silas Thorne considered Alexander Vance's decision to let a stray orphan run his financial empire an insult to the old world order. He intended to break them both, and he needed a pawn to create a public spectacle. "I am hosting the Leviathan auction in international waters tomorrow night," Silas said, pulling a silk handkerchief from his pocket and tossing it at Mia's feet. "The entire global underworld will be watching. I need a witness, someone to stand on stage and testify to the illegitimacy and cruelty of the Supreme Dawn. Do exactly as I say, and I will pull you from this gutter." Mia grabbed the silk handkerchief, clutching it like a lifeline. She didn't care that Silas was using her. She didn't care if it was a suicide mission. The sheer, intoxicating promise of vengeance completely consumed her broken mind. "I will do it," Mia rasped, her throat raw. "I will burn her to the ground." "Excellent," Silas whispered. He snapped his fingers. "Bag her, wash her, and put a collar on her. She belongs to the cartel now." High above the misery of Sector 8, the Underworld Command penthouse was a sanctuary of absolute luxury and impenetrable security. Chloe stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, wearing a sheer, floor-length silk robe, the heart-of-the-century diamond resting flawlessly against her collarbone. She was reviewing holographic financial projections of her newly acquired global shipping lanes. The heavy mahogany doors of her private sanctum opened silently. Alexander Vance walked in carrying a tray with 2 glasses of vintage, century-old red wine. Even in the intimacy of their home, the tyrant moved with the lethal, silent grace of an apex predator. He handed her a glass, wrapping his free arm around her waist and pulling her back against his chest. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, pressing a soft kiss to her skin. "You work too hard, my queen," Alexander murmured, his deep voice vibrating against her spine. "The world is already yours. There is no need to count every coin." Chloe leaned into his embrace, a soft smile touching her lips. "I don't count the coins, Alexander. I count the weaknesses of our enemies." The European markets have been strangely volatile today. Someone is trying to short our stock in the munitions sector. Before Alexander could reply, the Secure Coms unit on the mahogany desk chimed. Max's holographic projection flickered to life. Supreme Dawn. My lord, Max bowed respectfully. A courier just arrived at the perimeter. They delivered a physical invitation. It's carved from solid obsidian. Alexander's eyes instantly darkened. The warmth vanished from his aura, replaced by a suffocating, murderous pressure. Silas Thorne, the Baron of the Obsidian Cartel, Chloe mused, her sharp mind instantly connecting the dots. He's the one shorting our stocks. What does the invitation say, Max? It is an invitation to the Leviathan auction, held aboard a mega yacht in international waters tomorrow evening, Max reported. The Baron formally requests the presence of the Supreme Dawn and the Underworld Tyrant to negotiate the boundaries of global commerce. It reads like a threat, boss. Alexander set his wine glass down, his jaw tight. Silas has grown arrogant in his old age. I should have severed his head a decade ago. I will not have my wife stepping onto a ship swarming with cartel assassins. I will send the Blood Rose squad to sink the yacht. Chloe turned around in his arms, placing her hands gently flat against his broad chest. She looked up into his abyssal, pitch-black eyes. Alexander, Chloe said softly, her voice carrying an unshakable, terrifying confidence. If we sink the ship, the old money syndicates will call us butchers. If we walk into his trap and dismantle his empire from the inside out, they will call us gods. Alexander stared down at her, his protective fury slowly melting into profound, worshipful awe. The woman he had married was not just a survivor. She was a conqueror. He is trying to make a public spectacle, Chloe continued, her eyes gleaming with dark amusement. Let us give him a show he will never forget. Max, prepare the stealth chopper. We are going to a party. Yes, Supreme Dawn. Max grinned savagely before the hologram disappeared. Alexander reached out, tracing the edge of the blue diamond resting on her chest. You realize, my love, that if Silas speaks a single word of disrespect to you on that ship, I will paint the decks with his blood. Chloe smiled, leaning up to press a lingering, passionate kiss to his lips. I wouldn't expect anything less, my king. The Leviathan was not merely a yacht. It was a floating fortress. Stretching over 500 feet long, it boasted multiple helipads, a submarine bay, and a grand ballroom that rivaled the Palace of Versailles. Anchored in the lawless expanse of international waters, it was a sanctuary for the world's most dangerous billionaires, warlords, and syndicate bosses. The grand ballroom was packed with the global elite of the dark economy. They sipped champagne worth thousands a bottle, waiting for the main event. Suddenly, the massive steel double doors of the ballroom were thrown open by Alexander's elite tactical guards. The ambient chatter of 100 billionaires died instantly. Alexander Vance and Chloe stepped into the ballroom. They were a vision of absolute, devastating power. Alexander wore a bespoke tuxedo woven with ballistic-grade carbon fiber, his terrifying aura forcing the crowd to physically part before him like the Red Sea. Chloe walked beside him, radiating regal dominance. She wore a backless gown of midnight velvet, the heart of the century glittering like a captured star at her throat. They did not walk like guests. They walked like conquerors surveying a newly acquired territory. At the far end of the ballroom, standing on a raised auction stage, Baron Silas Thorne watched them approach. His hands gripped the edges of his obsidian podium, his copper eyes burning with intense hatred. "Welcome," Silas announced, his voice amplified by the room's acoustics, dripping with fake hospitality. "Lord Vance, and his lovely financial secretary. We are honored you graced our humble vessel." The insult was deliberate. Calling the Supreme Dawn a secretary sent a collective gasp through the crowd. Alexander didn't draw a weapon. He didn't raise his voice. He merely looked at Silas, and the sheer, oppressive weight of his murderous intent caused the champagne glasses on the nearby tables to crack. "Silas," Alexander's voice was a low, seismic rumble that shook the marrow in the bones of everyone present. "Choose your next words carefully. They will be the last you ever speak." Silas swallowed hard, a flicker of genuine terror piercing his arrogance. But he had surrounded himself with 300 heavily armed cartel mercenaries. He believed he was invincible. I mean no disrespect, Lord Vance, Silas lied smoothly, recovering his composure. I am merely addressing the disruption in the global order. For centuries, the underworld was run by bloodline and tradition. Now, you allow a stray woman with no lineage to unilaterally freeze European supply lines. The cartel demands compensation for the billions she has cost us. Chloe stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Alexander's arm to keep him from ripping Silas's heart out. She looked up at the Baron, her face a mask of bored indifference. You demand compensation from me? Chloe asked, her voice carrying a terrifyingly calm resonance. You invite me to a ship you cannot afford, wearing a suit paid for by my logistical infrastructure, and you demand money? Silas slammed his hand on the podium. You arrogant little girl. You think a few lucky stock trades make you untouchable? You are nothing but an imposter. And I have the proof. Silas snapped his fingers. From behind the velvet curtains of the stage, 2 cartel guards dragged a woman out into the blinding spotlight. It was Mia Winston. She had been scrubbed clean and forced into a degrading, cheap sequin dress. Around her neck was a literal, heavy leather dog collar connected to a steel chain held by one of the guards. She looked utterly broken, but as soon as she saw Chloe standing in her magnificent velvet gown and billion-dollar diamond, the rabid, insane jealousy overpowered her fear. The crowd of billionaires murmured in confusion, looking at the pathetic creature on stage. This, Silas announced grandly, pointing at Mia, is the true heir of the Winston family. The family this impostor maliciously destroyed to steal their wealth. Tell them, Mia. Tell the world who this woman really is. Mia grabbed the microphone on the stand, her hands shaking violently. She glared at Chloe with pure, undiluted malice. She is a thief. Mia shrieked into the microphone, her voice echoing shrilly. Chloe is an orphan. She stole my family's identity. She slept her way into the underworld and used dirty money to destroy innocent businesses. She belongs in the gutter. She is a fake.